Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Pelicans Daily, brought to you by FanArch. I'm your host, David Grubb, editor in chief of thebirdrights.com. Tuesday was a busy and very important day for the New Orleans Pelicans as Gail Benson officially introduced Joe Dumars as the new executive vice president of basketball operations. Officially, Joe Dumars started his job on Monday. So Tuesday was his second day, but Monday being spent getting to know the lay of the land, and he'll be doing more of that over the next several days. You'd imagine. He said his big thing at this point is to go in and listen to what folks in the building have to say. But after his introductory comments, after Gail Benson spoke as well, and in her comments, Gail Benson basically focused on talking about how she had a very strong relationship with Joe that developed over the last few years, that she wanted to bring more accountability to the organization, wanted to have more respect for the organization in general, and she wants to win a championship. It's all fine. Same with Dumars' remarks. When you hear his remarks, they sound really good. They're the kind of things that you expect from someone taking over a situation where people need inspiration, where people need some type of motivation, and they want some hope. Those are all fine and dandy. We get to the question and answers, and that's when the question that is on people's minds really was asked, whether you are pro Joe Dumars or against the hiring of Joe Dumars. And I was fortunate enough to be the first person to ask a question, and I asked quite directly, are you under any edicts from ownership as far as having to keep the coach, Willie Green, or having to trade any players? And I said, any. Certainly the focus is on Zion Williamson, but you want to know, does he have to come in and get rid of anybody else? And his answer was direct, um, and we will see going forward if it holds true. He says there are no edicts from management, that there are no mandates, that it is his job, and that Gail Benson has given him the ability to come in and do whatever he needs to do in order to make this a successful franchise. Whether you believe it or not, what's important there is that you set a bar for both where the media is starting and for where the Pelicans are going to spend anything going forward. So basically, by what Joe Dumars said on Tuesday, whatever decisions that do get made, if Willie Green is retained and his successor failure, if Zion Williamson is traded and his successor failure, whatever moves get made this offseason and going forward, Joe Dumars has said that they start and end with him. So when something goes well, Joe Dumars will get the credit. And when something goes wrong, Joe Dumars will have to be held accountable. But that's what's the dynamic that was set on Tuesday. And that's good. That's good. Because now directly we know who to go to and we know what to ask whenever something happens. That's fine. We'll put it all at his feet. And certainly Joe Dumars has the strength and the ability to take on that responsibility. Again, just going over his resume. Hall of Fame basketball player, um, NBA Executive of the Year, NBA champion as an executive, led the Pistons for 14 years. The first half of that, first 8 years, really good. Last six, not so much. So we'll see. It's a mixed bag, but anybody who works in any profession long enough is going to have some down episodes in their catalog. So what we're going to see is if Joe Dumars is the guy from the first 8 years of his tenure in Detroit or the last 6 years of his tenure in Detroit. A lot of that will depend, quite frankly, on what he gets from ownership. How much of their support is real, or is he being placed in a position to fail? Because I think ultimately that's what's going to happen. You can put anybody in the right seat, anybody that you want. You can get the best people possible, but if the circumstances around them are conducive to failure, then you end up with failure. And so we'll have to see if ownership is really going to step back and allow Joe Dumars to do what it is that he thinks is best for the New Orleans Pelicans. Because whether or not I agreed with everything David Griffin did, there were certainly times when you felt like you knew that there were guardrails that were up. Whether it's the understanding that this team will not go into the luxury tax, whether it was the understanding that this team would not make a real move, a dynamic move to try to pursue elite talent, it felt like those things were true whether they were or not. And that is something that has to change for the Pelicans. Perception is just as strong as reality. We see that every day in life, and certainly in the NBA is no exception to that. And the New Orleans Pelicans fall victim to that quite often. Is how are they perceived around the league? And I've used this comparison, I'll continue to use it, is that the Pelicans remind me of the Los Angeles Clippers from the 80s through the late 90s, before the Chris Paul trade, before they started to become somewhat more of a respected franchise. But there was a 2 decade span where the Clippers were as embarrassing as any team in the NBA. And it was because ownership had set a lot of artificial parameters and put them around um, the leaders of that organization, whether it was Elgin Baylor, whether it was Mike Dunleavy, whomever was in charge as the executive and making the decisions. Ultimately, they were being hamstrung by an owner who didn't understand how the NBA worked or didn't care, and quite frankly, looked at it as an opportunity to make money only. And you should make money if you're in the business. That's the job. But if you're in a competitive arena like professional sports, the goal is to win. And one of the things that I think was a little bothersome, and I think you could say it's nitpicking, but the statement that was made about how these two folks came together, and Gail Benson said that Joe Dumars reported that Gail Benson told him that her only edict was that she'd like to know what it's like to win an NBA championship. And I made this joke, and I think it holds up, is that, yeah, we'd all like to feel what it's like to win an NBA championship. Any fan would love that feeling. I think we all imagined it at some point when you're watching the games on television or whatnot. Hey, I would love to be holding the NBA championship trophy. I'd love to have the experience of feeling that. But when you're an owner and you have the financial resources and you have the ability to put a team of individuals in position to actually do that, it shouldn't be, I'd really enjoy the feeling of winning an NBA championship. What you want to hear is that we are going to win one, and we're setting a timetable to do so. If you watched Winning Time, and though that's a dramatic interpretation of the Los Angeles Lakers, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that Jerry Buss, when he took over that organization, his goal was to win the NBA championship every year. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that Saints fans, when you looked at Tom Benson at the prime of his ownership tenure, you thought that this was an owner who expected the Saints to compete for Super Bowls every year. And I think that when an organization sets that kind of bar, even if you miss, I don't think it sets an unnatural bar. It doesn't make people feel guilty when they walk into the building every day. It lets you know this is what we are supposed to do. And everybody has to be working towards that same goal. You can fail, you can have problems, but the problem with, let's say, the Las Vegas Raiders isn't the fact that they have just win baby or commitment to excellence hanging throughout their building. And Joe Dumars made point to say that the banners don't mean anything. They don't. Those little banners that say togetherness and compassion and teamwork, they don't mean anything on their own. But when you walk into a place every day and you know this organization is about championships. If you see the pictures of the trophies on the wall from the organizations that have multiple championships, you see the big glass trophy cases and the focus on what we have been, but also leaving space for success in the future. Then I think organizations respond to that. So maybe it isn't Gail Benson's temperament or personality to be overtly competitive. But I think in that opportunity, Joe Dumars had a chance to, um, paraphrase whatever she said to make it a little more suitable. All he had to say really to make it the a better statement was, Gail Benson told me she wants to win a championship and she expects me to get us there. If that had been the case, I think you feel a lot better. That's one sentence, and I think you feel a lot better as a fan watching that. You feel better about ownership as to what she sold to Joe Dumars and gave him that mandate going forward. And then you feel better about Joe Dumars because you feel like he's coming in understanding what the exact mission is. One of the things, when asked directly about what his expectations were for this season, Dumars rightfully said that he didn't have expectations yet because he wants to take more time um, to figure out what's going on with the business operations, with the player operations, um, with the Pelicans. He wants to know what this organization is top to bottom before he makes any sweeping changes. I think that's smart as well. One of the things he mentioned was that he spent this, time in the NBA's league office, and during that time, he got to see the inner workings of all 30 teams. He got to see the best practices of all 30 teams. He says he wants to set standards and that teams cannot waver from those standards. That every day the commitment has to be on this one common goal. Um, and when you learn what's going on with all these other franchises, what their standard is, what their level of excellence is, then I hope you do apply those best practices, whether it's in staffing, adding more people to the front office, adding more people to the basketball operations, adding more people to the coaching staff, if that's what it takes. Then I hope he has the capability of doing that. But what I'd also like to know is, and during his analysis, so what are the weaknesses of this organization? If you've seen behind the curtain to all 30 teams, where are they failing and where are the Pelicans relatively failing? What are the things that they have not done to put themselves to be in the most competitive situation possible? Because I think Pelicans fans have their own opinions about where this organization has failed. I think I have my own, but I want to know what Joe Dumars' assessment is. Um, we may never know, and certainly, that's part of business and doing what you need to do. But I think we'll see based on what he adds or subtracts from the roster of talent working in that building. I think for now, Bryson Graham, the general manager, is safe. I think for now, Swin Cash is safe. Um, there's no reason to eliminate either of them right now. If in the building Swin is doing her job, great, keep her. I don't have any problem with that. Bryson has certainly shown the evidence of what he can and cannot do as far as finding and acquiring talent via the draft. His input should be heard and should be valued. He's a homegrown um, and developed executive by the Pelicans, so certainly he has trust within the building. And if you're Joe Dumars, you need someone to be your emissary as you walk through, as somebody who understands what's going on. But you need to build your own relationships. You need to have people that you trust. So I expect that Joe Dumars will go outside and find some other people as well. But when it comes to setting that standard, I think people look at what is that standard going to mean, in particular for Willie Green and for Zion Williamson. And we shall see when it comes to those. But what Joe Dumars talked about extensively was his relationships and building those relationships. And so for Willie Green, Dumars pointed out that he's known Willie Green since Willie was in high school, playing for Cooley High in Detroit. He knew Willie when Willie was in college, playing basketball at the University of Detroit. Um, and certainly he was in position to draft Willie Green when he came out of college and wanted to, but Willie was taken by I believe Philadelphia before he got an opportunity to do so. So they have a relationship. And I think it's clear that the Pelicans would like Willie Green to be the coach this fall. I believe Green has one more year on his contract. So essentially, he's entering this season as a lame duck. No coach, excuse me, no coach likes to enter their final season of their contract, not knowing what their future holds. Teams don't like it. The whole status of a lame duck means that if the players know you could potentially not be around, then they are less likely to respond to you. And a coach knows that if he doesn't have security, that he's likely to be fired and he may not coach with the same level of attention to detail. So he gets a guarantee. Now, I don't think that's the case for Willie Green. I think he's the kind of person that last year of his contract or not, he's going to do his best, the best that he can, the best that he's capable of. But I do think, and I hope that Joe Dumars takes some time and that this is an opportunity for him as part of his reevaluation to make his decision. In my opinion, and I'll just continue to state this clearly, I don't think Willie Green should be returned. There's just too should be retained. I think there's just too much evidence that at this date and time, he is not the right coach for the New Orleans Pelicans. That's just not to say he won't be a better coach in the future. Plenty of coaches lose their first job and then improve on their second. They figure out the things that they didn't do well. Sometimes it takes going back and being an assistant for a little while and seeing those things again from a different perspective and then getting a second opportunity as a head coach. It happens. Guys who've won Coach of the Year awards, guys who won championships, have lost their first jobs because it wasn't the right fit. And I think the evidence shows, whether it's over 4 years not winning a playoff series, whether it's over 4 years having a losing record against the Eastern Conference, whether it's after 4 years having the most blowout losses over a 4 year span of any coach in Pelicans history, of the very few coaches that even got that far. Again, the 37 20-point losses, double digit 30-point losses, 6 40-point losses. All those things are unprecedented failures. Tying and breaking the longest road losing streak in Pelicans history, approaching the longest regular season overall losing streak in Pelicans history, multiple 10-game losing streaks, multiple. I mean, it's just the list of things that Willie Green has not done well is extensive. And the fact that in the NBA, you win quickly or you don't win at all. And I don't think at 62 years of age, which Joe Dumars will be in about a month. I think he's 31 days away from being 62 years old. At 62, you're not coming in for a long rebuild and overhaul. This is not tear it down to the roots and start everything over. There's certainly the understanding that Joe Dumars has to turn this around quickly because Pelicans fans are irate. They've lost their faith in the franchise and they've let it be known through the lack of purchase of season tickets, through booing at games, or just not showing up, that they don't like the product on the court. And Dumars certainly, for his part, says you fix the product on the court and everything changes. If you win, people show up. If you do these things, people show up. Yeah, that's all true. That's all true. I don't think Pelicans fans would care if the arena had no roof if that team won 60 games. We've been through the hot, we've been through the rain. Let it rain then. If that team's winning 60 games. But they're tired of feeling lied to. They're tired of feeling like the only reason that the basketball gets played is to take their ticket money, not to give them a quality product. And so what does that future mean for the players? Well, only two players showed up. And I don't think that's an indictment of Joe Dumars. I mean, it's the offseason. You've already had your exit interviews. Guys are scattered. But it was interesting, the two that were there, Jose Alvarado and CJ McCollum. Now, for CJ, who's going into the last year of his contract, I think if you're CJ McCollum, you want to understand exactly where this organization stands. If you're going to do a rebuild, that doesn't include me. I'm ready to go. Thank you very much. I came here on a mission to try to help you win a championship. If you're not ready to do that, let's move on. At 35 years of age, why would CJ McCollum be interested in a rebuild? There are teams that he could contribute to, and he would like to go do that. Then let's facilitate that. If you're going to try to win, then if you're CJ McCollum, you got to make me understand why you're trying to win and how you're trying to do that. What's my role going to be? He's also president of the Players Association, so certainly he has some interest just in the overall scope of how players are going to be treated and those types of things in New Orleans. I expect that to be professionally, again, considering where Joe Dumars comes from and the things that he learned in Detroit, one of the most progressive organizations in the league while he was there. What does that mean for a guy like Jose Alvarado, who, is an important reserve on this team? I think it's endemic of who Jose Alvarado is. You didn't get to this point by not being the guy who doesn't show up, by not being the guy who represents the team. And I think Jose takes that responsibility seriously. I think he's in the gym working out, trying to get better. He was meeting with coaches. They were all in workout gear, like they had been going through some activities that morning before the press conference. Look, Jose knows that has the potential to compete for the starting point guard position unless something gets done this offseason as far as adding to the roster. It could be his responsibility as a starting point guard. And he said he wants to come back next offseason better. We did his player grade on Monday. Then we talked about his improvement as a shooter. We talked about his improvement in handling the ball and doing more probe dribbling, getting into the paint to try to create offense for other people. We talked about those types of things. So for Jose, Being seen is a good thing. You have done a good job in representing this team, and I think for him, starting on day one, continue to be represented, continue to show your face, continue to show your commitment to the organization. And I think you're going to have to peel Jose Alvarado out of New Orleans when it's all said and done, just because he has made the commitment, and he's one of those people that if he's made the commitment, he's 100% in. He's going to fight for this thing till the day he dies, and I respect that. I respect his effort. But there was no commitment to anyone on this roster. He believes that there's some talent that David Griffin assembled some good pieces. He assembled that he believes that this team can compete, but without getting into specifics. But what was important, I think, one of the other things important that Joe Dumars mentioned is that he spoke to each and every player already at least once, including Zion Williamson. I'm interested to know what those conversations were like in broad strokes, because I think there's a much different conversation to be had with Zion Williamson than there is to be had with, let's say, Keon Brooks or Brandon Boston. For them, it's, hey, make sure you have a good summer, do your work, focus on getting better. Come in here in the summer, at the end of the summer, and be ready to work. But for guys like Trey Murphy, for Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, there has to be some level of reassurance. We're gonna be all right. Moving on from David Griffin, we get it. You're gonna be concerned. And I'm sure there was a lot of probative questions, getting to what failed with this organization. I think you need to have those conversations with the players and allow them to tell you exactly what went wrong from their perspective. Part of that listening tour needs to be some very direct questions with those players. What went right? What went wrong last season? And I think it's not going to be a direct attack on anybody. It's not going to, you don't want people to lay everything and say, well, this was Griff's fault. This is Willie's fault. And this is that player's fault. What you want to find out is where the broken parts of the mechanism are, where the decision making went wrong, who isn't contributing in this way, or where do you need somebody to give more from, or what are you looking for as a player? If you're coming in and you're saying, I need an offense that does this, this, and this, and we aren't able to do that right now. Or I think defensively we should have, and we're not doing that right now. You want to hear those things from players. How engaged are they in their own success and the success of their team? Because if their responses are simply, I need to get to this next year and this is what I need, is that the kind of player you want to go forward with? But if a player says, if I'm going to play with this guy, I see this. I thought we had opportunities to do this. And I think as this unit, we could do this. Or I think defensively, what we failed at this year, we were not great at rebounding. If we had these things as players, if we did this strategically, we could be better. I want that kind of input because I'm also taking that back to Willie Green if I'm Joe Dumars. And I'm saying, Willie, here's my observations. Here's what I've gotten from feedback from others. Where do you stand on this? And now I want Willie Green to tell me, okay, this is why I did this, this, and this. This is why I didn't do this, this, and this. Again, it's not a defensive position. What it is I'm trying to understand how you think and how you got to these places and how invested you are in the future. And I think the more people give you details about what they've done, you're able to see exactly where they're coming from. And that'll be really what's next for this team. Um, Overall, I think with Joe Dumars, his performance at the presser, it was a B, maybe a B plus. It was not, um, something that you want to put down and record and watch time and time again and say this was inspirational. I want to watch this and get this vibe from it. No, I think there were things that again that I'm going to be looking to pretty harshly in the future and pretty strongly and continue to examine. I want to know exactly how to hold this organization, continue to hold the organization accountable going forward. But I don't think they sold anybody on Joe Dumars on Tuesday. I don't think you can converted any of the flock that weren't on board. But I don't think you lost anybody who's on board either. It was a good professional press conference. You got good, for the most part, professional answers. Um, Not a lot of details, but I don't expect a lot of details. But overall, it was a good um, professional debut for Joe Dumars on Tuesday. Again, just to go through his overall record and things that you could kind of expect in that time with the Pistons. Um, over 600 wins with that organization. They won a little bit over 53% of their games, made 8 playoff appearances. And he also hired 9 coaches in 14 years, 9 coaches. So again, it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. And we'll see exactly what we get in the months and weeks to come. All right. Player grades. We did Jose Alvarado. And now we are moving on to the B's. Jose was our only A. We go into the B's. And the B's are Brandon Boston and Keon Brooks. Um, I think for both of these guys, B minuses. Um, it's nobody's getting an A. Let's just get that off the right now. Nobody in this organization is getting an A. Not when you went 21-61. Why am I giving these guys B minuses? Let's start with Brandon Boston. Okay, for Brandon Boston, I think the big concern for him down the stretch was his availability. That ankle injury that caused him to miss a number of games to close the season. He finished with 42 games played. At one point, let's give him his credit. He was leading this team in minutes, um, and just because he was available every game and had to fill in multiple roles. Played the three, played the two, played the point at different stretches. So we give him credit for his versatility in that regard. As a player, though, a lot of improvement over his career averages and production across the board. 10.7 points per game, by far career best by 4 points better than his previous high from his rookie season with the Los Angeles Clippers back in 2021-22. His 42 games played, second most of his career since his rookie season. 10 starts, the most of his career. His field goal percentage, the highest of his career at 43%. The big improvement for him, his three-point shooting, 35%. As a three-point shooter this past season, up from his career average of about 33%. Um, Took a decent amount of threes, more than 3 per game. Got to the free throw line. He continues to be a solid free throw shooter at around 78%. Rebounding was decent, 3 boards per game, 2 assists, 1.3 steals. One of the leaders in the Pelicans in steals. At one point, David Griffin said he was the Pelicans' best on-ball defender. I don't know if I would go that far. I wouldn't go that far. I would say he was a opportunistic defender who jumped passing lanes very well and has a lot of athleticism. So and has good wingspan. You're not gonna get past him with lazy passes, but I don't know if yet he's a great on-ball defender. We'll see if he continues to develop. But I think the reason that fans got behind him is that he fits a very good prototype at 6'7" of the long, athletic wing player. Showed he could knock down the outside shot. Showed he could get up and down the floor. Um, Good athleticism, can finish above the rim, and quite frankly, he fit into the way New Orleanians want to see their players play. Like he didn't back down on the court. He was an aggressive player. He played with a little bit of edge and a little bit of ruthlessness. So you like to see that as well. Looks like a guy who wants to compete at a high level, wants to be uh, a player that you can count on a nightly basis. Let's see how he continues to evolve. But I think there were a lot of good things to be found with Brandon Boston in a very bad situation last season. He'll need to continue to improve. Um, I think the goal for him depends on who returns. If CJ McCollum is back, then I think you're looking for him not to be the sixth man as far as providing instant offense. He becomes um, he and Keon Brooks, who we'll talk about in a minute, become kind of that fill-in at the small forward spot. Guys who can start at the three on occasion when you have injuries, or when they come off the bench, change the game with their activity. Kind of like taller Jose Alvarado's, where they can be aggressive, put a lot of pressure on ball handlers defensively, can switch and guard multiple positions, and then get out in transition and create easy scoring opportunities. That's what you want to see out of Brandon Boston Jr. going forward. But I think he's a good reserve piece. I think that's his ceiling at this stage, that he can become a very good bench scorer. If he can add a couple more points a game, become a 14 to 15 point per game scorer off the bench, then you've got something there. If he stays at around 9 or 10, then he's a solid bench piece at a low cost. Neither of those things is bad. But his continued improvement could give the Pelicans a very strong bench going forward. It's the difference between having a good bench and a bench that actually, like when you look at a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder, where their bench comes in and can just create problems, or you look at the teams that have gone to their second units and look for them to provide a spark on energy, a contrast in style to what the starters do. I think Brandon Boston Jr. is capable of providing that. Keon Brooks, further to go, a rookie this season, an older rookie at the age of 24. More development needed, only played in 14 games. So I don't want to get too heavy into his stats. Um, but to me, the big thing that you saw, and a young man who made 6 starts at the end of the season against some good teams that had um, postseason aspirations or were trying to secure their spots. And I think what you saw to him was overall very solid basketball. And again, a B minus grade because we didn't get to see a lot of him, but he gave you 10 points a night, shot 48% from the floor in 23 minutes, almost 24 minutes of action. 3-point shooting needs to improve, 32%, 33% from three. But there were nights where he shot it well. I think when you look at his shooting and the way he shoots the basketball, it's a hard motion. It's a quick flick of the wrist, but the shot doesn't have a lot of arc, so it tends to hit the back of the rim and go either straight down or pop back up for the miss. So I think he needs to improve there. But he hasn't been a volume 3-point shooter throughout his career. He's relied on his athleticism, relied on his physicality, which he has plenty of. Um, I'll tell you this: when you stand next to him, he's listed at 6'7", 210. He looks bigger, and not in a bad way. Like he casts a shadow when he walks down the hall. Um, and I think at the three position, that's a contrast again to what Brandon Boston provides. Brandon Boston being a much more lanky, thin, about 185, not as powerful at that position. Keon Brooks gives you that Najee Marshall physicality at 6'7", a guy who can mix it up on the boards and maybe be a small ball four, evolve into that going forward. Decent ball handling needs to improve there. But he didn't waste time on the court. When you get him the ball and he's going to attack the bucket, it's 2 dribbles. He's going to the rim. He can finish through contact. All those things are positives. And I think for Keon Brooks as a rookie, you're hoping again to be that 11th or 12th man on the roster. But in that position, there are opportunities. There are opportunities. And I think Keon Brooks has a future in the NBA, and it just needs to be cultivated. Perhaps that will be with the New Orleans Pelicans. We'll do some more ratings tomorrow, and we'll continue to do this as we go up and down the roster, and get to the everyone who contributed this season who's still on the roster. If you got traded, we're not going to talk about the traded guys. But if you're on the roster still, those are the ones we'll talk about, and the next one will be we'll get into those guys as we go forward. But um, overall, I think that Tuesday was the start of something, and that's the most obvious. But where it ends is what matters, and we'll give the space and the time for Joe Dumars to figure out what his role is going to be, and exactly what he wants to do with the New Orleans Pelicans. But we're looking forward to really, I think, what is going to be the impetus for a lot of decisions, and that's that lottery on May 12th. So um, that's 3 weeks. 3 weeks from now, we'll be doing the draft lottery and finding out where the Pelicans will pick. I just want to reiterate this as we go, as we end the show today, but I don't think it's a disaster if the Pelicans fall below 4. I think there's still quality players to be had in that top 8. It could be a disaster below that. as you try to rebuild this franchise. But I think in the top eight, you can still find the type of player who can make this team better. And that's the important thing. You may not get a franchise changing player at five, six, seven, or eight, but you can get a player who can come in and make an immediate impact. And that's more than anything, the Pelicans need that. They need to hit um, a double or a triple, maybe not a full home run, but they need to hit at least a double with this next draft pick. They need a low cost impact young player to help this franchise move forward. But most importantly, the Pelicans need an identity. And Joe Dumars took some steps on Tuesday to establishing that. We'll allow him to do that. We'll see what the future holds. I'm not going to prejudge the outcome of this. But again, before we go, last thing I'm going to say is the most important factor in Joe Dumars' success and ultimately the success of the New Orleans Pelicans are the people in ownership and the people who are the final bosses on this. If you can't get past their ineptitude or if they do not get out of their own way, you could have Jerry West sitting in that front office. You could have Phil Jackson sitting in the coach's chair. The organization wouldn't win anything. So hopefully ownership has learned its lesson to let the basketball people make basketball decisions and go forward in that way. If not, we'll be back here in a couple of years doing the same thing, getting all excited over somebody new taking over the Pelicans, talking about the next coach, talking about the next trade, talking about the next draft pick, as if that's going to be the thing to turn it around. Something in the with the Prince song, something in the air does not compute. Got to make it compute. Got to make it work. Got to make the math math. All right, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Please hit the like button, the subscribe button, leave your comments, your questions below, and I will get to them in the next episode as best I can. You know how to check me out. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram. You can find me there. You can also find me on TikTok. So all those places you can check me out. And of course, thebirdrights.com. Got information and stories up for you there. Until the next time, y'all be good. Enjoy the day. And I'll see you again on Pelicans Daily.